Sunrise in Kiev. Once again, the sound of gunfire in the distance as Russian forces come ever closer to Ukraine's capital. Southwest of the city, plumes of smoke rise above an oil depot in Kiev. Ukrainian forces said the fire began after a Russian airstrike. Some Western intelligence officials say Moscow's invasion is slower than expected, but the pace of Russia's troop movement means little to people in places like the southern city of Volnovakha.
Look, we were sitting in basements and they were walking around everywhere shooting. We couldn't leave the basement for over a day. Then I walked up to a soldier and I said, "Boys, my mum is bedridden up there. She's a grandma and I can't go up there." The guys wanted to help me bring her down into the basement, but when we went up there, she had already died. It was already too late.
In Kharkiv, emergency workers search for survivors in what's left of an apartment block. The eastern city has been shelled for days by Russian forces, as has Chernihiv in the north of Ukraine. Reminders of the past are everywhere in this city, but the present is relentlessly bleak.
The enemy is continuing air and rocket shelling of the city of Chernihiv. The peaceful population is dying and there are many injured. The enemy is hitting civilian infrastructure.
Western Ukraine has been spared the worst of the conflict for now, but things could be changing. In Lutsk, a Russian missile attack destroyed an airfield on the city's outskirts. 4 soldiers were killed in the attack on the airfield. The funerals of 2 of them have just taken place in this church in the center of the city. The mayor of Lutsk says that people here, though, won't be intimidated by Russian forces.
People just a little scared, but we have no total panic in our city. We don't see people leave in our city. We don't see refugees live in our city, and we are still believe that Ukraine will win.
Lutsk is 110 kilometers from the border with Russia's ally Belarus. Some Ukrainian officials say Belarusian troops could join the war. Others say that's unlikely.
If they want to come here, let them come, but we will destroy them and send them back in body bags.
I hope Belarus will reconsider their position. There's enough war. It's a massacre.
A shelter in the city is now home for Vyacheslav and his family. He says they fled more than a week of unbearable Russian shelling. His children cried every day. Lutsk is close to Belarus, but it's also not far from the Polish border. Vyacheslav says they could go to Germany, but for now he just feels lost.
They took everything from me. I had a comfortable house. The kids all had their own room. Now where will I go? And for what? I'll have to start from scratch. I'm not 20 anymore. I'm 41.
For people caught up in this war, there are painful decisions. Often there are no choices. Parents across Ukraine are struggling, trapped in a terrible situation they didn't create, holding their children's futures in their hands.
A desperate scramble to get on a train out of Kiev. But most of these people aren't residents of the capital. They've come from places like Irpin and Bucha on the outskirts of Kiev, places that have seen the worst of the war so far in this region. They sit in shocked silence, women like Svetlana still trying to understand what they've seen.
Our home was destroyed. An explosion blew up the windows, doors and everything. All the people who lived in the building ran to the basement. We moved to another part of the city to find a friend's house, but the bombardments continued even there. The Russian tanks kept firing at our houses.
And this is what they're fleeing. Andrei is a volunteer coordinator at the central station. His job is to make sure those fleeing from outside of Kiev can get help. Most, he says, show visible signs of psychological trauma.
Our priority now is a hotline. It's Irpin, it's Bucha, it's Borzel, it's Gostomel, and this line, okay? And actually they are really shocked by all these things that are happening. They didn't expect the Russian army to hit civilians, to hit the civilian houses, and they never believed it. but they really under fire and under attack. This is destroyed, completely destroyed houses, many people killed.
The city's already 50% evacuated. Most of those people actually left in the early days of the war. The priority now is to get people from other front lines like Bucha, like Irpin, into Kiev and then into this station and get them out. In many ways, Kiev Central Station has become Evacuation Central Station. Tears of relief and sadness as the train leaves the station. Besides what few belongings they can carry, they also carry the horrors of what they've witnessed. Unsure also when they might see their home again, or whether that home will still be standing.
Looking for cover in a city virtually under siege. With attacks coming from the sky and on the ground, a population on the run. Leaving the streets empty and eerie. Barricades made of everything large enough to stop Russian troops entering the country's capital city, Kiev, the main prize in Vladimir Putin's war. But not everybody has left. Deep below the city, people have settled in for the long haul, hiding from bombardments and shelling. Daria Oblashevich has been sleeping in the subway with her 2 young sons since the war started. Her husband is fighting on the front line.
Nearby our house, there are such bombs. There are flying some attacks. We hear the sounds. He's very nervous about it. And here we don't hear any sound. There are safe place. There's shelter.
And in the darkness of the underground, there is someone to bring a smile to her children's faces. Larisa Klimchik normally works with cancer patients, but they have all been evacuated.
I am very worried because my own children and grandchildren have been evacuated, but I have an older mother who's 86 and I'm very concerned about her. But the children I visit don't care about my worries. I have to support them. I have to support their mothers. That's why I must smile, be inspired, be energetic, jump with them.
The train company is allowing people to sleep inside the carriages to stay warm, until they need to use them again.
For those who remain in Kiev, life has moved deep underground. Here they hope to be safe from Russian bombs and missiles, but they're all holding their breath for what's coming next.
And if they will be able to go back home at all. But some are taking their chances. This family left their apartment after an airstrike nearby. Now they are going home.
We are coming back. Do I feel safe? I don't know. I feel optimistic.
Why are you optimistic?
We are winning, so why not?
You don't feel the Russian forces are approaching the city right now?
Oh, they are approaching, but we'll see where they get.
Nearby we find a family finally reunited after a nerve-wracking escape from Irpin, a commuter town near Kiev, now one of the front lines of this war.
We were leaving on foot from Irpin on March 8th. We were leaving on foot. We were leaving on foot to a subway station, which is nearly 2.5 hours of walking. There was a lot of shelling and shooting. There was no light, no gas, no water in Irpin.
Despite their fear, the family wants to stay together. They have to take care of their 99-year-old grandmother. She's too frail to move.
I really trust the Ukrainian army. I probably never believed in something so strong as I now believe in the army. But I'm very worried about my children. I can't tell you where I will go. If I take my children to safety, I will have to leave my parents and my husband behind. My heart is breaking and I don't know what is the right thing to do.
For now, she is staying with her mother and brother, in fear, but at least they are together. Clinging on to hope, the barricaded capital will be able to hold off a full-scale Russian attack that could come at any time.
It is really cold here today, -8 degrees.
In the eastern city of Kharkiv, the losses are so great that reports are rendered in numbers. 400 buildings destroyed since the war began, including 48 schools. 190 civilians dead, residential areas struck 89 times in a single day. as if counting them somehow completes the picture, as one bombed-out building starts to look much like another. They don't wait for air raid sirens anymore in Kharkiv. Many haven't left the city's metro stations for more than a week. Here is where I sleep, this young woman says. And over there are my things, and there is where we all sit. Ever more civilians are getting caught up in this war. Ukraine's defense minister says Russia has killed more innocent people than it has Ukrainian soldiers. One day, war historians may argue about which city had it worst. Today, though, it is surely Mariupol that is most like Ukraine's Stalingrad. Besieged for more than 10 days, hundreds of thousands unable to escape, deprived of water and heat in temperatures well below zero. A Red Cross official in the city describes children going hungry, a black market in vegetables, fights breaking out over food, conditions the mayor calls medieval. Critical infrastructure continues to get hit, with a special focus on military airfields, like here in Lutsk, northeast of Kiev, and Ivano-Frankivsk in the west. As evacuation routes continue out of some embattled places, a tide of humanity is shifting across this country, and not all of it heading for the border. The United Nations estimates 1 million people have become displaced internally, seeking shelter where they can find it. Like Zhenya, the 24-year-old mother of 3, stoking the wood fire in an abandoned farmhouse 600 kilometers from her home outside Kiev. They even brought the dog, a Labrador pup called Gerda. But they didn't bring Dad. He stayed behind to join the territorial defense.
The children know that their dad is defending the city. They understand that. I believe in 1 year it will be over and we will be able to go back.
Zhenya and her children are being relocated now to a better home in the village. This tiny rural outpost in western Ukraine, like so many others, throwing their arms wide open to fellow Ukrainians fleeing the war.
Goodbye. Slava Ukraini.
The UN also estimates that 12 million people inside Ukraine will need humanitarian help, and few besides Zhenya are guessing how long it might be before they're able to go home.
Dozens of buses stand ready to enter Mariupol. Filled with food and water, they're trying to reach one of the areas hardest hit by Russian shelling. Their only protection, signs on the windows, people in Ukrainian. They try to go in, but are turned around.
I have to say this with pain. Mariupol remains blocked by the enemy. Russian troops did not let our aid into the city and continue to torture our people, our Mariupol residents. Tomorrow, we'll try again. Once again send food, water and medicine for our city.
For nearly 2 weeks, no one has been able to leave this city. And no aid has entered.
We were trapped underground and 2 children died. No one was able to save them.
People here are desperate for help.
There are thousands and thousands of families trapped in this city who are running out of water. And then at that point, what do? Even our team, the International Committee of the Red Cross team that is in Mariupol, they've effectively run out of water. And they're telling us, okay, now we go to a stream and collect water, we boil it, we drink it. Well, how do tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people do that, especially if you're elderly?
These satellite pictures show industrial and residential buildings flattened, fires still burning. Ukraine's foreign minister, Dmytro Kuleba, says Russia wants to capture the city at any cost.
Mariupol is crucially important for Russia because if they seize control over the city, they will establish a direct land corridor to Crimea from Russia, and they will also cut us off from access to Azov Sea. This is why we so fiercely and heroically defended. And this is why Russia is so ruthlessly trying to destroy the city and capture it at any cost.
Ukraine says it will not surrender or retreat, and attempts to reach people trapped in the city will continue.
We will try tomorrow again to evacuate people from Mariupol. We will again do it tomorrow in front of the whole world, in front of the politicians and leaders, in front of the entire planet Earth.
But for now, these buses remain full of aid, but empty of people who want to leave.
There's little comfort in war, but some people are doing all they can. For a third day, Ukrainian forces evacuate people from Irpin on the outskirts of Ukraine's capital, Kyiv. It's a precarious journey. Russian shelling is never very far away.
Irpin is being constantly shelled. There are planes bombing Russian soldiers. At home there is no electricity or light, no heating, and the temperature is going down. We had to go.
We hate Putin and Russia so much. We hope the war will be over soon.
People are also fleeing Sumy, east of Kyiv, after Russia and Ukraine agreed on a temporary ceasefire in the area.
Eastern Poland, where foreign forces have come and gone for centuries. Once again, the streets of Przemyśl echo, this time to the sounds of American boots. Sightseeing, but still a visible presence to reaffirm America's commitment to its allies. In Warsaw, U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris confirmed the delivery of U.S. Patriot missile defense systems to Poland.
I am here, standing here on the eastern flank of NATO to reaffirm our commitment, the United States commitment to Poland and our NATO allies. And there is no question that we stand united as it relates to many issues, and the particular issue of Ukraine.
Economic sanctions remain the main U.S. weapon for isolating Moscow and exacting a high financial price for the Russian invasion of Ukraine. But as long as Russia controls the skies, Ukrainians pay with their lives. One volunteer sent the U.S. Vice President this message from the front.
What can I say to Mrs. Kamala Harris? I would say that the necessary condition to preserve global democracy is closing the sky to Russian aircraft. If you do this, there will be victory for democracy all over the world.
For now, the U.S. focus is on drawing a red line at Poland. The number of American troops in the country is in the thousands, levels not seen since World War II.
Now, this part of eastern Poland is under a high security alert, so we can't get out and film like we normally could. But the profile of this airport has become distinctly more military in recent weeks. Far more military aircraft taking off and landing, and far more military hardware on the ground.
The closest runway to the border with Ukraine is at Rzeszów Airport. There is no mistaking the American presence here. Once again in Europe, talk of armies, alliances, war. 19th century battle lines being drawn with 21st century weapons.
This is Journey's End for one of the few remaining routes out of Russia. 2 trains a day run from St. Petersburg to the Finnish capital Helsinki. It's a service that has seen a 5-fold spike in bookings since the start of the war in Ukraine.
I'm not sure we are coming back in like 1 or 2 months, because we are afraid of staying in Moscow right now. Anything could happen. We're afraid that the borders might close. We're afraid that the economy might not recover. Many of our friends left Russia. They went to Georgia. They went to Dubai.
Airspace closures have created bottlenecks for Russians with the means to leave. Hundreds have queued at the border with Latvia. A seat on the Helsinki train can mean an onward flight to anywhere in the world, but tickets are hard to come by. These trains were running at 20% of capacity before the start of the war. Now they're fully booked, with around 500 Russians arriving in Finland every day. Some are returning to Russia too, but the numbers coming into Finland are set to rise.
So now we are just, want to add 1 more train per day, starting from the next week. So we are just negotiating about that. We want to keep the train traffic open, that people can travel from Russia, and of course also back to Russian if they have some reason to travel.
On the platform, few of those we spoke to were actively emigrating. Some work in Finland, others are seeing family while they can, or getting back to homes abroad.
That's the only link left, you know, I mean, for people to go to relatives, and it's terrible situation. It's like somebody is dead in your house. I'm 50% Ukrainian, 50% Russian, so for us it's a huge tragedy.
While that tragedy continues, it's Ukrainians who need a safe haven here and elsewhere in Europe, as the number of refugees approaches 2 million.
Here on the Medyka border between Poland and Ukraine, former members of an elite French military force are helping to protect refugees who may be unaware that war isn't the only thing they're fleeing from.
This morning we found three men that was trying to get a bunch of women into a van. I cannot 100% say that they were trying to recruit them for sex trafficking, but when we started talking to them, when we approached them, they got nervous and they just left immediately. So we're just here to help.
Many Ukrainian refugees reaching border countries seek to reunite with friends or family members across Europe.
We are waiting for him.
After a 5-day car journey from the bombed city of Chernihiv, Irina seeks shelter on the Suret border between Romania and Ukraine. She is waiting on a friend in Berlin to arrange housing for her and her 2 children while her husband and parents stay behind. Help offered by strangers who greet her and other refugees is abundant, but so are the risks.
There are many very dangerous propositions from different people. They can offer us help for free to reach any country, but it's not true.
Along this border town, men offering free rides to women have been sent away. Plainclothed intelligence officers are on the lookout for criminal activity, and law enforcement teams are advising women arriving at the borders on how to stay safe.
We try to discuss with every couple, for example, coming from Ukraine, especially women and young girls, to have some preventive measures, like to have a full charge battery, or to remember every time the number of the car that they were going in.
A recent report by the European Commission estimates the annual global profit from human trafficking is around $32 billion. Sexual exploitation is most common in the 27-nation bloc, with nearly 3/4 of all victims female, and almost every 4th a child. And in humanitarian crises like these, those numbers go up.
The risk for these things to happen is very high. So in times like this, when people mobilize, but the risks for other people that can capitalize on the pain of these families is very high.
The challenge now, once borders have been crossed, is to stay safe and alert until they reach their destination.
11,000 tons of wheat arrived in Lebanon this week, but this will be the last shipment from Ukraine. The world's key wheat producers, Russia and Ukraine, are at war. Lebanon, like other countries in the Middle East and North Africa, can no longer rely on them for most of their imports. They're now trying to make up for an expected shortage.
We've reached out to a number of countries, including the US, India, Canada, and some European countries, which produce the soft wheat we need for our bread.
But the problem is not just finding alternative sources. Diversifying supplies could mean transportation delays or an increase in shipping costs. Wheat prices have already hit a 14-year high.
Definitely we will resort to more expensive countries that export wheat, which would sell to us at prices that are not as cheap as in Russia and Ukraine. So if the conflict is prolonged and supply is less, this will add pressure on balance of payments or the budget.
Egypt, for example, is one of the largest importers of wheat in the world, and 80% of its supply is from Ukraine and Russia. It is considering raising the price of bread for the first time in 3 decades. It's no different in Lebanon, where authorities warn the central bank may not be able to subsidize bread if prices continue to rise. The Tunisian government, which is believed to be running out of money, has been rationing flour and reduced bread production. increase in prices will affect millions of people in the Middle East and North Africa who live in poverty.
The Ukrainian-Russian war will affect import, export and trade because we are all importers of wheat and most of the foodstuffs are from abroad.
Across this region, economies have been hit by inflation and large public debts. Others have been destroyed by war. Syria no longer produces enough wheat to feed its population, so it relies on imports and is now rationing wheat. The World Food Programme says 12 million Syrians are food insecure, while Yemen is on the brink of famine.
Yemen, for example, where 16 million people require food assistance, and the World Food Programme is assisting 13 million of them. This country is almost entirely dependent on food imports and depends on imports of wheat from Ukraine, by about 30%. So any shock, any slight shock would actually send these countries into a very, very serious food crisis.
Food prices are at their highest level, so is poverty, in a region already in turmoil and where higher bread prices have led to popular anger in the past.
They came to pray for peace. There was a rabbi and an archbishop, and followers of other religions all gathered in the Ukrainian Orthodox Cathedral to offer support to the Ukrainian faithful and to call for one thing: an end to the war. It was the largest interfaith prayer service of its kind in New York since Russia invaded Ukraine.
This was a way to come together with other people, pray together, be in solidarity.
Rescue those who are struggling to survive. Everybody is together in saying innocent people cannot be mercilessly murdered. That is unacceptable according to all faith traditions, or if you have no faith traditions. It's inhuman, it's indecent, it's immoral.
The Russian Orthodox Church Patriarch Kirill, an ally of Vladimir Putin, has justified the invasion during his sermons, saying it is a struggle against sin. Religious leaders here flatly reject that.
It is shocking to see that the religious leaders of Russia, and especially Patriarch Kirill, almost justified this invasion and this bloodshed. This is unacceptable. And I think that the Russian people deserve better leadership, both political and religious.
For some of the religious leaders, they say this Mass was just the beginning, and that they hope in the coming days and weeks they can travel to the region themselves to offer prayers and support in person to those that need it the most.
In basso, Vai, vai, vai.
This was one of the Pope's first gestures for peace in Ukraine. It happened in February of 2014. The Pope prayed for the 17 people killed at a pro-European Union demonstration, which was violently repressed by Yanukovych's pro-Russia government.
Sono vicino con la preghiera all'Ucraina, in particolare a quanti hanno perso la vita in questi giorni e alle loro famiglie.
Russia managed to annex the Crimean Peninsula, but that didn't put an end to the conflict. A year later, Pope Francis addressed these words to pilgrims visiting St. Peter's Basilica.
Fratelli e sorelle, so che tra le tante altre intenzioni che portate alle tombe degli apostoli c'è la richiesta della pace in Ucraina. Porto nel cuore lo stesso desiderio e mi unisco alla vostra preghiera perché al più presto venga la pace duratura nella vostra patria.
In 2015, Pope Francis met with Vladimir Putin and asked him to respect the peace agreements signed in Minsk and to allow humanitarian workers access to Crimea. That same year, he also met with the then president of Ukraine, Petro Poroshenko, and assured him that he never forgets to pray for Ukraine. Pope Francis wanted to travel to Ukraine, but because the situation was too complicated, he instead visited the Ukrainian Catholic community in Rome.
Sono qui per dirvi che vi sono vicino. Vicino col cuore, vicino con la preghiera, vicino quando celebro l'Eucaristia. Lì supplico il Principe della Pace perché tacciano le armi.
The conflict has escalated once more. Pope Francis began sounding the alarm months before all-out war broke out.
Desidero assicurare la mia preghiera per la cara Ucraina, per tutte le sue chiese e comunità religiose e per tutto il suo popolo, perché le tensioni ad essa siano risolte attraverso un serio dialogo internazionale e non con le armi.
At various general audiences and Angelus gatherings in 2022, the Pope prayed for Ukraine. In February, he expressed his deep pain and concern over the worsening situation and the development of increasingly alarming events.
Vorrei appellarmi a quanti hanno responsabilità politiche perché facciano un serio esame di coscienza davanti a Dio, che è Dio della pace e non della guerra.
The Pope also called for a day of fasting and prayer for the country. Cardinal Pietro Parolin launched a message expressing the Vatican's willingness to be a mediator in the conflict. Pope Francis visited the Russian embassy to the Holy See, a strong diplomatic gesture that completely broke with protocol. At an Angelus in late February, the Pope greeted Ukrainians in St. Peter's Square in their own language, and he asked that refugees be welcomed and that humanitarian corridors be established.